prophecy against Tyre. Last week it was a prophecy against Jerusalem. The week before it was a prophecy against Babylon. And there were others. And Robert Harvey dealt with a few of those too. So today it's a prophecy against Tyre. And I thought maybe we'd just take a quick look and see where is Tyre, just in case you need a little geography lesson. You know, we've got Jerusalem kind of right in the middle of the slide, and Tyre is on the coast, and Sidon is just above that. And there's two names that's going to pop up a few times today. And I guess maybe while we're looking at it, you see Cyprus, which is an island right off the coast. And this area where Tyre and Sidon is located is called Phoenicia. Remember, the Phoenicians were the big sailors. By big sailors, they were pretty much a merchant class of people. You know, they went and transported stuff all over the place and got very wealthy. That's what that was all about. And Sidon and Tyre is in the area of modern-day Lebanon, just in case you needed that. So down on the left-hand side, you kind of see the Nile Delta, the land of Goshen. I don't know what I did there. It's my ears are in the wrong direction. That's the issue, I think. All right. You may have to help me, Gil, before it's all over here. So, all right. So, and I'm mentioning these because all these names are going to come up again, and I just want you to kind of get an idea of where they're at before we start going. Okay? Kind of, there's the terrain, you know, and I'm a geography guy. I like that. I was actually an engineer. I wasn't a geography guy, but I love geography now. Okay, so first question out to me was, why are we even talking about this? And why is there, why is he targeting? Let me see how he worded that. He said, a prophecy against Tyre. Why is there a prophecy against Tyre? Okay, Tyre, and then just for your background, a powerful medieval Mediterranean city-state located in Phoenicia, which I just mentioned, famously known for its maritime skills, extensive trading networks, and production of prized purple dye. The Tyrians, the people of Tyre, built a wealthy island civilization. And one of the things that was so great about what they did is right on the coast, and it was a little island right off the coast. There was the old city of Tyre, but there was the island of Tyre that had two very good harbors at it. And it was where people could bring in the goods, and then they would transport them, you know, over a very short distance over to the mainland for all the merchants. And the big merchants, the older wealthy merchants, were in Sidon. Sidon was the old city. That was kind of really the headquarters up there in Phoenicia. But all the money, it had its wealth because of Tyre, because Tyre was the place where the goods could be shipped back and forth on the ocean. Let's see. So I said why? Well, Tyre later rejoiced in Judah's destruction. Now keep in mind, I said this is 713 BC, but the destruction of Judah takes place in 586, about 125 years down the road. And when that happened, the people in Tyre were unhappy. They were very happy. They were happy because they thought it would open up more. Judea used to take away a lot of business and stuff, and they thought, well, that's more for us. It's a good thing. I forgot what the term was in German they use when you take joy in somebody else. Yeah, yeah, something Freude. Yeah, I forgot what the first part. Yeah, it was something like that. Yeah, Schadenfreude. That's right. You take joy in somebody else's misery. Well, they're not Germans, but I didn't think we had a good word for it in English. So the bottom line is, because of the way that people behaved up there, God was not happy with them, and that's why there's a prophecy. So in the first verse up there, he says, he says, "Wail, you ships of Tarshish, for Tyre is destroyed." Now, it's not destroyed when the Assyrians are there. It's not destroyed in 713 BC. It's destroyed about 125 years later. But this is all prophecy, remember? This is Isaiah, and he's talking about something that's going to happen in the future, and Tyre will be destroyed. And so what does he word it this way? You ships of Tarshish. So it's worth looking at the map again. there's a little place out here on the bottom of Spain called Tartessus, and they think that that was the location of Tarshish. Tarshish. What was Tarshish famous for? Mines and smelts, and the people could boil down all these chemicals, and tin mines, silver mines, lead mines, and they would transport this stuff everywhere. But anyhow, it depended upon finding customers. Where were all the customers? Kind of in the Middle East. In the Middle East, how do you get the stuff there? You transport it by sea over to your favorite harbor, and the favorite harbor for everybody was at Tyre. Okay? So he said, what he's saying, what Isaiah is saying is that when they lose that harbor, Tarshish is going to be very unhappy. Okay? You may have to help me before it's all over. I think I can make partial fixes, but I'm not sure I got the permanent one here.
I think you got it. Oh, we got to get this off here.
Okay. Maybe that's it. My mouth was moving too much and it was making it fall off. Okay.
All right, let's send that back.
Okay.
Then,
All right.
how's that? Try to talk.
Gil always saves us, doesn't he? Thank you, sir.
Is that feeling
Yeah,
comfortable?
feels comfortable. And I'll try and not touch it. And I'm probably grabbing hold of that cord. Okay, so anyhow, that's what Tarshish is famous for. And yes, Tarshish, have we ever heard that term Tarshish before anywhere? No? Never heard it before? Well, close, but I'm going to tell you about that right now. So, here's one place we have heard it, in Jonah. So, remember Jonah? Jonah was told, go to Nineveh and save those heathens up there, those Assyrians, who later came down and just wiped Samaria out and were a threat to Judea the whole time. And what did Jonah do? He said, God told me to go that way, but I'm going that way. And he went to as far as he could go. Tarshish, and I'm going to back up one thing there. Tarshish, maybe I went too far. What did I do? I don't know. Am I going the wrong way?
Yeah, you're going the wrong way.
Okay. Yeah, I think up is... Okay. Tarshish is way out west on the bottom of Spain, and it was as far as you could go in the other direction as far as Jonah was concerned. And so if you want to flee away from God's direction, you want to go. So Tarshish was what you might call, if you're a flat earth guy, it's just before you fall off. Okay? It's just before you fall off the edge. So that's what it was known for. So let me see if I can find one more little bit of crazy information here. You mentioned Tarsus. Saul of Tarsus. That's what you were thinking about. And because it's easy to confuse Tarsus and Tarshish. You see where Tarsus was? It was just right up the road, a little north of Phoenicia, and in the southern part of Turkey. And that's where Saul and Paul was from. But you remember that Tarshish is out about here. And so it's different. And the only reason I put that up is because I think it's easy to confuse, and it's probably worth clarifying that right up front. So we don't think that, wow, poor Paul, he was born a long ways from here. Well, let's see what the next thing is. A prophecy against Tyre. Oh, and in verse 2 it says, be silent, you people of the island, and you merchants of Sidon, whom the seafarers have enriched. Remember I said Sidon is the big town. That's where all the old folks lived. And then and Tyre was where all the merchant stuff was. That's where the sailors and everybody who were transporting the goods were at. Okay, but it was the treasured place. Now it says, you island, you people of the island. So Tyre was a town on the coast below Sidon, but the island of Tyre was where the harbors were. That's where all the merchant stuff was dependent on, and that is what he's singling out. So, from where did the Tyre merchants get their products? In verse 3, on the great waters came the grain of the Shihor. The harvest of the Nile was the revenue of Tyre, and she became the marketplace of the nations. Remember on the other slide I showed you where the Nile Delta was? They called it the black mud stuff there. Great place. Remember, that's where all the Hebrews went when Jacob came down, and they kind of planted them there. I think probably they didn't think they were giving them a good deal, but it turned out they put them in prime real estate there in the Nile River Valley. But those people that grew all the crops and had all the grain, they needed markets, and they got the markets by shipping their stuff to Tyre, and Tyre, was the relay point for then giving it to the merchants who would sell it throughout the Middle East. In verse 4, be ashamed, Sidon, and you fortress of the sea, for the sea has spoken. It says, I have neither been in labor nor given birth. I have neither reared sons nor brought up daughters. What is he talking about here? Did that mean anything to y'all? Did y'all get that automatically? I did not. But as I looked it up and everything, what the scholars have said is what he's talking about here is there are no children for this place. If Tyre goes away, there's no replacement for it. There's nothing else that can pick up the slack if Tyre goes away. And it says, in verse 5, when word comes to Egypt, they will be in anguish at the report from Tyre. That means the people that were transporting things from the Nile Delta, they won't have the market. They'll lose their important customer for all their goods. Now, it doesn't mean they won't be able to go find somebody else, but it's kind of like when you got the real great customer, you don't want to lose that great customer. That's what the people in Tyre were. So, verse 6, when Babylon attacks, where will the merchants go? So it says, cross over to Tarshish, wail, you people of the island. Is this your city of revelry, the old city whose feet have taken her to settle in far-off lands? Keep in mind, we're talking about prophecy, and all this is going to happen 125 years down the road when Tyre gets overtaken. So the people probably didn't understand what Isaiah was talking about at the time, but he's telling them, hey, you're going to have to, it's going to be different. It's going to be different down there. Then Isaiah asked the question, who planned this against Tyre, the bestower of crowns, whose merchants are princes, whose traders are renowned in the earth? Okay, all the wealthy people are up there in Sidon and Tyre. These guys, they're the kingmakers. The kingmakers, they get people crowned, make them princes. They're all wealthy. They're wealthy and they're getting wealthier. Their Vanguard stock is going up all the time. And in verse 9, we get the answer to who caused this. The Lord Almighty planned it to bring down her pride in all her splendor and to humble all who are renowned on the earth. So, pride, there's that old pride problem comes up. Seems like God doesn't like pride. He's constantly telling people, be careful. If your pride gets the best of you there, you tend to forget about God and start thinking about somebody else, like yourself. And he felt like that's what was happening there in Tyre. Till your land as they do along the Nile, daughter Tarshish, for you no longer have a harbor. So what he's saying is when the big disaster happens and Tyre goes away, the people that in Tarshish who had you as a customer, they're going to have to resort to something else. And he's kind of saying, hey, they might become agrarians, and have to plant crops and do that kind of thing. I'm trying to make sense out of what he's saying here, and I'm trying. Okay. Tyre's punishment. Okay, in verse 11, the Lord has stretched out his hand over the sea and made its kingdoms tremble. He has given an order concerning Phoenicia, that her fortresses be destroyed. He said, no more of your reveling, virgin daughter Sidon, now crushed. So he's saying after this happens in Phoenicia and Babylon comes in the future and takes over all this, things will be different. You won't be reveling. That virgin daughter Sidon term there kind of bothered me. What does that mean? But I guess as you go back and look at everybody who talks this, it shows up in the Bible in a number of occasions. the virgin daughter. Implication here is that when you were talking about a virgin daughter, it was somebody who was protected, who was taken care of, who was untouchable. Untouchable. You ever date anybody like that? They're being real careful with the fathers were. I've met those fathers before. Never been conquered, untouchable. And that's kind of how they felt like Sidon and Tyre felt about themselves. That they were surrounded by water, they had a strong navy to protect themselves. In fact, even the Assyrians came through to conquer folks before, but you know what? They left Phoenicia alone. I won't say they completely left alone. They tried to conquer them, they just couldn't. They couldn't. They were kind of invulnerable with that, having their forces out there on the island, and other people did not have good navies to go and deal with them. All right, in verse 13, reminder, that even though we're talking about Babylon out there 125 years ago, or 125 years from now, that right now the Assyrians are taking over everything. They just conquered, 10 years before they've conquered Samaria, and the only thing left in the Hebrew nation is Judea, but the Assyrians were not able to deal with the Phoenicians. They could not get out there and do that. So he says, look at the land of the Babylonians. This people, this is Isaiah talking about the Babylonians. He said, this people that is now of no account. And it's because the Assyrians were not real happy with the Babylonians. They considered it like a sub country, one that they actually owned. And they would even send some of their family members down to run the country in Babylonia. But they didn't, Babylonia was nothing special. It was kind of out there on the edge of the desert, but down there at the end, almost to the Persian Gulf. But they didn't count it for anything. Everything, all the good stuff was happening up at Nineveh and a place called Ashur, I believe, where they had the capital for the Assyrians. The Assyrians have made it, Babylonia, a place for desert creatures. They raised up their siege towers. They stripped its fortresses bare and turned it into a ruin. Wail, you ships of Tarshish, your fortress is destroyed. Okay. Boy, he loves that Tarshish word. He keeps bringing that up. Is there a linkage to the 70-year exile? I put that on this slide, but that slide is not what Isaiah said. That title is not. But he did say what's in verse 15. At that time, Tyre will be forgotten for 70 years. And that time, he means when the Babylonians finally come in 125 years from now and take it over. Tyre will be forgotten for 70 years. We've heard that 70-year term before, have we not? Isn't that what Jeremiah said when the Judeans were exiled? He said, hey, you better go down there and marry people and live your life because you're going to be there for 70 years. Is that the same thing here? No, he kind of says, he uses the 70-year term, but he compares it to the span of a king's life. What he's saying is, you're going to have a whole generation here that Tyre will not be in existence. But at the end of these 70 years, it will happen to Tyre as in the song of the prostitute. Wow, we would get the sex term in here, wouldn't we, before, just to keep our G rating up a little bit here. Prostitute. Okay, take up a harp, walk through the city, you forgotten prostitute, play the harp well, sing many a song so that you will be remembered. Now this is Isaiah saying it, not John Allen. So why is he doesn't really mean prostitute person. He means that the city acts like a prostitute. It is selling itself. It's out there doing that. And he said, when after that exile, after you guys go through this thing with the Babylonians and come back, you're going to have to learn to resell yourself. However, I think his little reminder here is that prostitutes, if you get some fresh prostitutes in there, you might can sell yourself, and they'll get out there with the harps and play like the sirens, on the islands. But an older prostitute could have trouble, and that I think he's kind of saying that. You got to watch those sailors. They go for the young prostitutes. Okay. Sorry about you folks that are married to Navy guys. All right. Isaiah And I did not mean that in a personal way. It's just a story. Okay, Isaiah prophesies what will happen to Tyre after the exile. At the end of the 70 years, the Lord will deal with Tyre. She will return to her lucrative prostitution. What he really means is her business, her business, and will ply her trade with all the kingdoms on the face of the earth. Yet her profit and her earnings will be set apart for the Lord. They will not be stored up or hoarded. Her profits will go to those who live before the Lord for abundant food and fine clothes. So you kind of ask the question, does Tyre and Sidon ever turn around, and do they become something a little more positive that the Judeans can look at? Well, after Jesus comes and is crucified, they became a very Christian country. That whole area of Lebanon was Christian for hundreds of years after Christ, and it was a good marketplace for the apostles. They went up there, and they converted people in that area. Did you notice that in the scripture that was being read this morning, Tyre and Sidon were mentioned in verse 17 of Luke? So what was going on there? I think Jesus, he had just been talking to everybody. He just picked the apostles, remember? He enumerated all the apostles. And then he said he went out and he gave a talk. And who was in the audience? He said the people from Jerusalem, the people from Judea, and the people from Sidon and Tyre. Now this is in Christ's time. So obviously things did turn around. There did become a more positive look about those folks. So, as Isaiah has prophesied, things will get better down the road. Now, let's see. So what happens to Tyre? Phoenicia, that's where Sidon and Tyre are at, is conquered. What happens is the Babylonians come in and they wipe out Jerusalem in 586. Guess what? You remember I told you that it was hard to tackle the issue of Phoenicia because they were invulnerable almost out there. But the Babylonians, once they got Judea under control, were taking them on. And they did go after them. And they spent the next 12 years, 586 to 573 BC, attacking those guys. And they did conquer them. And they did the same thing that they did to the Judeans. They took the good ones, the skilled people, the ones who could do things with jewelry and all kind, and intelligence and stuff like that, and they imported. They took them off to Babylon. They left a few people there, but I can tell you it was the ones who had skills. They went. Kind of like Daniel did in 605. Remember, 586 is when the people from Judea were conquered and Jerusalem. But it was about 10 or 15 years before that is when the Assyrians had made their first shot at taking over Jerusalem, and then they took a bunch of people, the high roller folks, and they took them and made them captives and took them to Babylon, and Daniel was in that group. Daniel had been there for a while before, like 10 or 15 years before Jerusalem was finally conquered. Okay, while Tyre never regained its, let me go to the next step. Phoenicia is conquered, I said that. The leadership and skilled workers are deported to Babylon. Cyrus, okay, so things kind of stay that way for a while from 573 to 539 BC when what happens? That's when Cyrus the Great comes in, from Persia, the Persian king, comes in and he defeats those Babylonians. And when he does that, he says, you know what, I don't want to manage all these Jewish people here either. I'm going to let them go home and, revive their culture and pay taxes, which is what a lot of those guys did. But he at least gave the Jews a chance to recover. And same thing happened with Tyre and Sidon. In fact, it happened just a few years earlier than the Hebrews getting free. Cyrus the Great recognized that there was a lot of opportunities, backsheesh or something. No, it wasn't backsheesh. That's another word. Okay, but there were a lot of opportunities in having that merchant kingdom revived. He wanted it to come back to life, and so he released a lot of those people just in the few years before he released the people in Jerusalem and Judea. Let's see. Tyre and Sidon are restored under Persian control. Yep, okay. While Tyre never regained its former commercial status and influence, it remained important enough to tempt Alexander the Great. Remember him? Now, that happens in 332 BC. Alexander the Great, that's 200 years later. I mean, and I'm just kind of telling you a little history on Tyre, for example. So, in 332 BC, Alexander the Great is conquering everything. He's essentially conquering the world. But when he gets there, this impregnable place at Tyre just won't let him in. Won't let him in. They think they can defend themselves against the greatest warrior out there, Alexander the Great. And so they even go to the extreme of insulting him. He actually has to come and visit the town, and they won't let him do it. And you know what? He gets offended about that. And he decides these guys are going to fall. And what he does is he has his troops tear down the old city of Tyre, take all the stone and put it in the water out to the island of Tyre, and he makes a causeway. And he goes out there. He makes a causeway. It takes about 70 years to do it. But no, I'm sorry, 7 months to do it. 7 months. And he builds this causeway, and they go, and then they build these big siege engines, where the towers with the weapons on top and everything. And they roll them out there, and they eventually take them out. So Tyre does get its, what's a good southern term? Comeuppance, is that a term that we all know? Okay, comeuppance about this. Let's see. And then, of course, because these people fought so hard, he kills about 8,000 of the warriors and the sailors that are there. The people, and those military people had already decided this isn't going well, so they had started transporting all their families away. And lots of family members were sent away, and they were sent to, not to Tarshish, but a place close to it called Carthage, which Tarshish is on the Spain side. Carthage is on the Algeria side, the North African side. Okay? And of those people that didn't get killed, he sold 30,000 of them, and that's primarily children and women. He sold them into slavery. So he made a little bit off that deal. Let's see. Okay, I mentioned that, Christianity does have a little touch there, but there is one story, everybody's always saying, where's Jesus in all this, And I did notice that not just in Luke is Sidon and Tyre mentioned, but even in Matthew and Mark, it's mentioned that Jesus actually goes up to Sidon and Tyre, and he's up there and he's visiting folks. And there's a little story, I kind of just copied it out of the Bible here, that he goes and while he's up there, the people know Jesus is a powerful guy. He is healing people. He is saving people. There is something about him that they want to touch him. They want to be around him. And a woman from Tyre, Canaanite woman, comes up and asks him to heal her daughter who's demon possessed. And Jesus kind of says, I really don't have time for this, and I'm supposed to be looking after the people down in Judea. You're a Canaanite, and so, the text is in there if you want to read exactly what it said in the Bible, but the story is really one of, and it's his apostles are also encouraging him not to fool with this woman. Don't fool with her. We got to look after the people down in Judea. That's what you're here for, And so the woman pleads with him to help, and he finally, as she's doing that, I guess he notices that she's throwing her bread to the dogs, looking after her dogs, for example. When she ought to be looking after her children, and he says, you shouldn't do that. You should put your priority on your children. And the woman turns to him and says, right there, even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table, which kind of implies that she's like the dogs, I think. That's what it implies. She's like she and the people up there, they're not They're not the Hebrews. They are not the Jews. But they want to get benefit from what Jesus is doing and saying and acting about. And you know, Jesus' reaction is right there on that verse 28 there at the end. He said, "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted." And he's doing that for a Canaanite woman. Okay? So that's my way of getting a little Christianity into the story of Sidon. So what's happening out here in the future? Spring's coming.
Our God is an awesome